Hello, this is part 2 of my chat with the lovely people at LGBT Foundation, specifically their chemsex recovery team. So if you haven't heard part 1, go find that wherever you found this. And just like in part 1, there's a big content warning on this, as it'll be more of the same, talking about substance abuse, including drugs, alcohol, chemsex, and all sorts of things like that. That's not for you right now, that's cool, just go listen to some other episodes and I'll be back next week with more of your usual filth. If you're hanging around, then let's jump straight back in. This is probably true. Please be aware that the following contains strong language and adult themes. It would be boring without them. After learning a little about the LGBT Foundation in the previous episode, I wanted to find out more about what someone who came to the team asking for help would experience. So I spoke with 2 of the recovery officers, Gracie and Missy.
I think first things first when it comes to service users coming into the space for the first time.
That's Missy.
I think the key is just make them feel as comfortable as possible and just building that good rapport with someone. And the minute you kind of make someone feel safe and comfortable in the space, then it makes it 10 times easier. So the first point, of course, is always making someone feel as comfortable and safe as possible and making them feel like you get it, because we do get it. But I think in a lot of other services, they haven't always felt like that, and they haven't maybe felt like they fit in there, for example. So I think definitely always making them feel comfortable. I think pretty early on, we always try to establish what their goal is, whether that's being completely sober, whether that's just the harm reduction route, whatever that may be. We work with them towards their kind of shared goal. We do a lot of tools around building motivation, maintaining and handling urges a bit better. We try to get them in the community a bit more. I think a lot of people that come to our services, especially in relation to chemsex, feel like they struggle to be a part of the community if they're not maybe going out or using chems or being in that side of it. So we kind of try to show them that there are other ways you can be involved in the community. You can come volunteer, you can come on our wellbeing walks. We're always doing something here, and we're just trying to show them that there are other avenues to feel connected to that side of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, it is that, and that's what's so important. If you are misusing substances or if you identify as an addict, whatever it is, it's having that sense of community. Yeah. Like, it's so important.
And that's Gracie.
They say that connection is the opposite of addiction.
Yeah.
So it's wanting to kind of rebuild those connections. And, to touch on what you said, Missy, of course we do work around triggers, around urges, around cravings, things like that. But the bulk of the work that we do is all the stuff that underpins those behaviours. So it's how do you talk to yourself in your head? It's, are you compassionate to yourself? It's, are you carrying a lot of guilt and shame? Where do those things come from? How can we kind of touch on those things in a way that will, I think it can just kind of open doors when you do start to address the things that are underpinning your behaviours. And once you've got that down, once you realise kind of the reasons for your behaviours, it's a lot easier to change them. Yeah. But that's just why it works, I think, because it's not just, let's not take drugs today, let's look at your triggers, let's try and avoid them. It's not, we need to look at all that other stuff in order to change. Yeah.
I think when people think of recovery, they think of it as being as a way of, you need to stop these addictive or harmful behaviours, and that's kind of like, that is the end goal, or if that's the end goal for you, but there's so much before that. It's about building resilience, having a new positive mindset, and I think all these little things that then help that end goal of either stopping drugs or minimising how often you are using drugs so much easier. And I think that's where a lot of the work that we kind of comes in at.
To generalise a little bit, and I don't want to speak on behalf of a lot of people at the organisation, but a lot of us already have that shared understanding, don't we? We are part of the community. We have people in our lives who have been directly affected by substance use addiction. I'm sure some of us have personal experience with that. And I think that's just is what is so fantastic about this organisation, and specifically around our recovery team, is that we get it. We understand already having that kind of like inherent shared understanding when you're sat down with someone who's been really vulnerable and telling you about, all of these different kind of aspects of their life and who they are as a person. I don't think there's any better people to kind of discuss that with them than, I don't want to say people like us, but do you know what I mean? People like us. Yeah. I think what we do is so important because unlike other services, we're not completely abstinence based, and a lot of other services will ask that from you. We work with people with where they're at, whether they are just wanting to get a better understanding of the drug use and kind of the ways that it's affecting their life. If they just want to cut down, some people do want complete abstinence, and that's fantastic that we're able to offer that support. But it's just really
Working
important.
towards their own goals.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is kind of client led in the way that we work and the one-to-ones that we do with clients.
The idea of a recovery program that didn't require or expect users to stop taking drugs was new to me. So I grabbed Simon and Rob from the previous episode and asked them if they'd found this part of the Foundation's approach helpful, as there's no pressure to stay sober and no feelings of failure or guilt if you don't.
Yeah, that's what it is, the feeling of guilt. Yeah. Because then I'd be using that as another excuse. Oh, I feel bad, I feel guilty, so hello, can I get what it's... But I was just open and honest. Like, after this meeting, you do know that the weekends in a couple of days I will be doing the same again. But I was doing it less. Like, instead of like just stopping, because it's dangerous as well just to stopping it. So I was doing it less because I was speaking more openly, to people in regards to it. But I was still doing it. I just had to be honest. I couldn't turn up and say, no, I'm fine. And really, I was sweating and shaking, and yeah.
But I think as well, because the conversation that it then leads into is very much, well, yeah, you've done that. So like, why did you do it? What caused the thought process? And then you start thinking about it in a different way than I used to think about it, because it used to be oh, well, I'm doing it because it's going to sort out my anxiety and depression and this, that, and the other. And then when you start to like look at it from a different avenue, I know for me it was weird because I was like, oh, well, I'm having caffeine to wake me up, then I'm having weed to bring me down, and then if I'm having weed, I'm going on Grindr and hyperfixating on this idea of like getting someone over and it turning into something, and then it had just snowball effect into the rest of it. So I was like, okay, so that means that I can't have caffeine now. And it's just like little simple things like that like when that sort of situation happened where it's like you have the freedom of just doing what you're doing, but then you're doing it actively and thinking about it actively rather than just what used to be a very passive thought of I'm just going to throw tonight away or throw this weekend away, and it just be a random Tuesday and be like, screw it, to now being, okay, so that happened, but why did that happen? What was going through my head? Why was I starting to do all of this? And then that then helped the actual recovery side of it.
I started writing it down. I started journaling, which was good because I had to. Otherwise, I'd even be forgetting why I'm doing it. I'd just be thinking free night, But I started writing it down, and then like I seen like my pattern was with certain dates as well. Say if an anniversary was coming up or something that had happened in the past, then that's when I started looking at the trauma side, thinking every time it comes up to something, because I'm normally everything's fine, but really I was reading that back thinking, you ain't fine, lad. You're not fine at all, you're broke.
It is so important to just reach out and speak to other people and access that support. It can just lift that weight from you. It can be so powerful speaking to other people who already have that shared understanding.
That's what it does, really. It stops you feeling alone, like you're the only person in the world that does it. Because at first, like I was thinking, oh, is it just me that's doing this? Like, because everyone else is going to work and doing jobs, but they was going to work leathered still. But like I was thinking, is this just me? Is what's wrong with me and stuff? And then when you start hearing people's stories in the group, you're thinking, oh yeah. Oh, this person does it as well. Like, so you do see like other people, well, hear other people's stories and how it's affecting them. And support as well, because like they know what's going on with you as well, so you don't feel as lonely. That's the word, that's the big word, loneliness, really. Yeah, that's how it helped me, really, but I kept quiet at first, I did. I just sat back and listened first before I got involved. Yeah.
And I think for me, I don't think the group thing necessarily was helpful for me at that point in time. It might be different in different times and different people in different places and things. But what it provided me was a bit more of a understanding that I can talk to other people about it without fear as such. And I've had situations over the past like month of where I've been in chemsex parties without taking any chems whatsoever and having conversations with the people that are at them, but in a situation that's like, say, 6 steps before where I am at this point, and just being like, I'm happy to be sober at this and just chat away and whatever, because I still like certain people that are in those situations, and the rest of it, we're still close friends and stuff. But then they're then finding out that they're in that exact same mindset of, this is actually starting to take over my life now and I don't like it anymore, and there's certain instances that has happened that it went from being something that was enjoyable and an escape to now something that I'm trapped in. And it's like, it's been interesting to kind of relive out chemsex parties in a sober sense and just talk to people in those kind of energies, and it to actually be just as the exact same mindsets that we're in, where it's like, this is taking over my life, I don't enjoy it, I don't know why I'm doing it. And you're like, oh, okay, here's a card. Yeah. Have a nice weekend.
Here's a number to ring.
Yeah. So that's something that I found really interesting recently. Seeing a friend tomorrow night who is in that same sort of scene, and they're wanting to sort of start stepping away from it and wanting to hear my story from that and vice versa. And it's just meant that it's made me a lot more connections from being honest about where you are in that sort of path. Because so many people I thought was just still enjoying it and still in a good place with it, but more often than not, it's the opposite.
Yeah, definitely. It becomes something else that you've got to escape from.
Yeah.
It's just like you're escaping from life, escaping from them.
And it wouldn't be a Probably True episode if there wasn't at least a bit of talk about the sexy stuff.
It's kind of like the drug side of it has, for so long, for about 2 years, it bridged a gap for me between my brain and my body. And now that has been removed, that bridge has kind of collapsed, and I'm in the process of trying to rebuild that bridge brick by brick. And the thing that I found really wild for me is that I was using drugs to feel a certain way and feel a certain confidence towards sex, to feel a certain way towards sex. And what has happened from like rebuilding this bridge has been like, it's taken him back to being like a 15-year-old kid and like having all of these like sexual experiences as if I'm like a child again, like when it's all first starting to happening and you're experimenting, and like, yeah, it's weird, like having make-out sessions that have lasted for a full movie, and I'm like, that's not happened for decades, but it's because I'm starting to understand and what my body's saying to my brain and trying to be respectful of all of that.
Yeah.
I don't know what yours has been like.
You articulated it better. I was gonna say I felt like a virgin again. I did. Like, I went back to square one before the first time I had sober sex again. Oh, I swear, I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? It was like throwing a nurse into a mechanic's garage and saying, "Fix that car."
Yeah.
I was just like, what do I do here? Because you're so used to putting something in your system and thinking you need that as confidence. And so when it came down to it, sober-minded, I was like, oh, has anyone got like an encyclopedia or something that I can take tips off? Like, one part of my brain is telling me, oh, just put porn on so you can learn off in quick time. Do you know what I mean? It's like that part of your brain still like stuck in chemsex mode where your mind's trying to tell you, oh, you still need a substance to get through this. I've been in a couple of group sessions in here and a one-to-one where I spoke about sober sex, because it's totally different. It's just mind-blowing. Like I just thought I'd be able to get sober and stuff and I'd just be fine. But yeah, it just took me back to being a teenager again. Like, I was like, petrified I was. Yeah. But yeah.
No, and I think when you're doing the recovery program, there wasn't like sections of, we're going to talk about sex next week, so you've got to expect to talk about sex. It was all kind of led by me. That's what I'm kind of trying to say. And then when I did lead with something, Grace would turn around and be like, okay, I can put you in touch with another provider if we can't provide you with that service, or there's another course that we do that we can then put you in with. But like, even with like the sober sex side of it and starting to like be a kid again, I think my first experience was just meeting eyes across a bar and going up and chatting to someone and then having a cheeky snog in the bar and nothing else happening, but being like on a 4-day high just from that experience and being like, this is wild. But it was just, having spent 2 years of just being like on a phone on Grindr, just chatting to someone and being like, yeah. And it's like you then lose so much of this connection and the feelings that can provide and the dopamine that can happen from all these different like experiences that happen. And just literally eyes meeting across a bar and going and talking to someone. I didn't even think that happened anymore. And then it was that, and I was like, oh my God, this is wild.
Time was getting on, so I finished up by asking Rob and Simon if there was anything about the recovery process that they wished they'd known sooner.
I'd probably wish that I knew where it was going to lead to, and that there was actual, like, I could have gone to support sooner if I knew, like, that I was just able to go and get support. Like if it was spoke about more, and definitely the end results of taking drugs and what they do, because it's awful. You know what I mean? It's awful. That's the best word for it. But it's just waking up like that and, oh, no. Sometimes you're not even waking up. You're just staying awake. So, yeah.
I feel like for me, it was like, if I knew that it was going to affect my sober life as much as what it affected my sober life, I kind of thought that that escape was like, okay, that's the escape, but it's separate to everything else, so it's okay. And it kind of was for a little bit, and then when it starts creeping into the sober life, but it does so in such a way that you kind of don't realise it. Yeah. It's like I was saying before, you end up like feeling anxious and depressed and then using more drugs to then feel less anxious and depressed. And it just becomes such a spiral. Yeah. And like I've like myself and like I've spoken to loads of friends about it, where it's like, we were like, oh, we've ended up bottoming more because you just can't get it up because you've taken too many drugs that has just affected erection problems. And it's like, if I'd have known at the beginning of that whole thing, do you know what? If you carry on doing this for 2 years, you're going to have erection problems, you're not going to be able to have sex, you're not going to be able to do any of this stuff that you value, but that's going to be that. You'd just be like, okay, right, now I actually know. But like, I've even got friends that are still going through this situation at the minute, and they're like, because they didn't know that and no one really talks about it, they just hide away from even the conversation itself, rather than being like, do you know what, it is just temporary. One of my support workers was like, oh, but are you getting erections when you're sleeping at night? And I was like, yeah, I'm literally waking up in the middle of the night and it's like not going down and I don't understand it. And it's like, that's because that's your brain trying to speak to your body to check it's still working. And I'm like, that's such a wild way of thinking about it. I'd never thought about it like that. And I was like, so it is just psychological, me being in my own head. And that's why these issues are now coming about. And like, even that's like subsiding now, like it's all going. And it was this fear at first of like, this is now permanent. This is the rest of my life.
Forever. Yeah.
But like, luckily for me, I know that I've come out of it quick enough and I've seen it fast enough for myself to be able to fix all of these bridges that are broken and just rebuild back to where I was before, but also then trying to now deal with the previous trauma stuff to then try and actually build an even stronger bridge, because before it was just built out of straw or something.
Just broke.
Do you know what I mean? Someone just put a jacket down and I was just walking over that. Now it's like proper bridge. Yeah.
So it turns out that the LGBT Foundation's recovery team do great work, offering support and connection and generally making the world a little more bearable for people who are struggling. And if you're thinking about reaching out to someone and asking for help,
be brave. It's that. It's be bold. You know, I think you've already made the first step if you're considering it or thinking about it. That seed's already been planted. It's just a matter of time, and we will be here when that time comes to give you that support.
And that you're just not alone in this at all. You're really, really not. I mean, you've got us as a support network when you walk through the door, but also there's hundreds of other people that are also gone through similar or the same thing as you, and you'll find a lot of connection and a lot of hope in kind of building them connections with other people here at the foundation. So yeah, definitely it's just that you're not alone in this at all.
And there's links in the show notes, of course. Thank you to everyone at the LGBT Foundation and all of the service users that I spoke to for this video. There were so many other amazing, inspiring stories that I just didn't have time or room to include here. I am so deeply grateful beyond words, and I'm very aware that this episode could have been a bajillion hours long, and I'd still want to talk about how brave and honest and amazing and inspiring that everyone I spoke to was. I'll be back next week with some standard smutty service, and until then, take care. I love you.
I think if you've heard something in this podcast or something's kind of resonated with you, I think come to the service. I don't know why I started adding that as like an advert. I don't know where that went.
Literally, that's so good.
I really was like, I don't know why I'm doing this.
No, that's so good. Yeah, definitely.
You're natural.
You know, thank you.